Ladies and gentlemen, our next panel is going to focus on the impact of the expanding EV market on OEMs and what the future may hold for them. So let's just get right to it. So I'd like to welcome my panelists to the stage. They are Jörg Hofmeister, who's head of charging and energy, Model E Ford Europe. Julian Galonska, he's the manager of EV charging and energy at General Motors Europe. And last but not least, Gert-Jan Gerenics, I hope I pronounced that right, who is head of network development at NIO. So is everybody here? Come join me on the stage. Welcome, everyone. That's my chair. Scoot over, scoot over. Okay. So that's okay. Don't sit in the moderator's chair, or you'll get into big trouble. Then you're going to have to ask all the questions. That's what would have happened. You would have to moderate the discussion. Okay, so OEMs, of course. Well, first of all, welcome, gentlemen. And OEMs have a very particular position in the market. You have your own particular challenges. So why don't we just start out with kind of a general basic question about striking the right balance, because you need to do many different things. You want, of course, to meet the rising demand for electric vehicles, but you also have your brands, you have your standards of quality, you have a standard of service, you have the look and feel of your vehicles that your customers have grown to expect. So how do you balance all of these things? So meeting the demand for EVs, but also maintaining the level of quality and USPs for your famous, well-known, and well-loved products. So why don't we just hear from everybody? So we'll hear from Ford, so Jörg, and then Julian, and then Gert-Jan.
Yeah, I think the main point is really to bring the right cars to the market. Yeah, this is really the prerequisite in order to really find the right customers. From a Ford perspective, I think it's a really great opportunity for us because Ford doesn't have a kind of big market share right now in Europe, but we're completely changing our market portfolio, our vehicle lineup. So I think Ford is known as a kind of value for money car. So you all will remember Ford Fiesta, Ford Focus, which are great cars. And when you see our electric vehicle lineup, we are now more focusing on iconic cars. So what we did in the past is we took the Mustang and really said, okay, let's take the Mustang and just make an electric car out of that. And this we will continue with the Ford Explorer, of course. We have the F-150 Lightning in the US. And I think this is the main point, to really find the right design, the right car. Also, what is important for Ford in the US to bring the adventurous spirit, right? So to bring a little bit from the US to Europe, the good things there. And yes, of course, we need to balance that because we still need to sell our ICE vehicles. Of course, we need to earn money for the new cars. And maybe last question from my end. Ford did a conscious decision in the last year, and Ford is now divided into 3 business units. The first one is Model E. Model E is focusing on passenger vehicles, pure electric passenger vehicles. And we have Ford Blue for the ICE vehicles and Ford Pro for the commercial vehicles. And with that, we have great balance for the right decisions in the future. And this, I could speak about that for hours, of course. But I think you need the right setup, and we are creating the right setup in order to bring the right vehicles to the market. And then all other things will follow, like charging ecosystems, like energy, like further services we are bringing to the market.
Okay, so a kind of restructuring, just about focusing on maybe not too many things at once. So that's definitely helpful.
Focus is a most important point. Yeah? You can't do everything at the same time, so you need to focus. This is what we are doing in Europe.
Any parallels to what's going on at General Motors from what you've just heard?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, focus is key, and finding the right balance is also key, especially in the situation that we're in. As General Motors, obviously we've left the European market 6 years ago. focused really on the US market in general, building up our product portfolio on the EV side, and now re-entering the European market. So obviously, there's a lot of catching up to do for us to understand what's happening in the market, to understand how we can fit into the market, how we can use the products that we have to bring a solution to our customers here in Europe, to new customers. So we have to find this balance of global products that we have, but local adaptation, but also understanding our customer needs specifically here in Europe and really tailor those to those customers. And then from a focus perspective, it's really about doing the right things at the right time. We're still growing the business, and we're not just looking at finding the best experience, which is also key importance for us, but also really setting up the business in the right way so that we can take the learnings that we've had from a North American perspective, combine them with the learnings that we now have had over the past couple of months, almost a year, that we've been setting up shop in Europe, and putting these together to make sure that we can build a solid solution for those customers out there. And it's challenging, but that's really where we have to find that focus and really be very diligent in picking out the projects and picking out the things that are driving customer value and also helping us set up the brand in the right way to build a solid basis and build on top of that.
Can I push you a little bit on that? Can you give us an example of how you want to build the brand up, or what kinds of things have you undertaken within the company? Are there new business units? Have you hired, completely different type of employees? Like, give us some examples of what's going on in the company.
Yeah, so of course, setting up the business in Europe, we have our leadership team from North America and obviously lots of experience from the company itself. So obviously that inherent knowledge of the brand, of the values that we have will come to Europe. But it's definitely the goal to run the company here with Europeans. So that's really key to make sure that we get this customer experience in and really can talk the language of our customers to make sure that we're not just basically creating a not invented here issue where we just throw something over the pond and hope that it sticks and it works. We really want to make sure that what we build here is built for the European customer.
Mm-hmm. And what about at NIO, Gert-Jan? How will your company be striking the balance of meeting the demand for EVs, but also keeping that quality?
Well, at heart, we're an EV company, right? So in 2018...
We can't really hear him. Can we just make sure the mic is on?
Is the mic on?
No, it is. Okay,
all right, good. So at heart, we're an EV company, right? So in 2018, when we were founded, the baseline was always EVs. So we don't have the legacy or the heritage that you guys have. And we've been trying to rethink everything, right? So when you go into our stores, we have new houses rather than dealerships or stores, where you can go in and find a community. You can find new life. You can find much more than what you find at traditional dealerships. And that's something that we're trying to get customers into, because obviously the heritage that these two gentlemen have is something that we don't have, right? We haven't have that long base of customers. And we've started out as a global company from the beginning. So we do manufacturing and design. We do that in Munich. We do advanced engineering in Oxford. And the rest has really been built and catered for China until now. So there we have about 300,000 cars on the road. We have 1,500 swap stations, which is a weird duck in the pond, I think, today. But that's what we're now bringing to Europe. And so we see a lot of demand for that. A lot of, it's very difficult to get an EV these days. You'd be surprised how difficult it is to get that. And we're really catering well to that. When you look at the yellow car, the yellow EV that we have outside, the Touring, that's really a car made for the European market, where you'll see a lot of European demand come on, because touring cars are the second most sold cars in Europe. So that's really where we're trying to cater for that European market.
I want to hear a bit more about that. So what exactly is your focus when it comes to serving European customers? How is it different than what you already know works for your Chinese customers, let's say?
It's a good question. Well, so at heart, we're a user-oriented company, right? So what our users want, that's what we get to. And so when we launched our brand last year in October, we really looked at what is it that those customers needed. Our initial thoughts, which were right, was to start with subscription, offer flexibility to our users that they can easily subscribe and unsubscribe. Again, it's a brand new brand, so you want to try something out. You want to try it for a month and then see how it works. And then a lot of our users that joined our app, that downloaded our app, we've now over 60,000 users of our app in Europe, they mentioned that they wanted to be able to buy the car. So within 1 month, we flipped around our whole sales tools. Every system that we had, we made it into a sales team. And now we're able to sell cars as well. Just to listen to those customers and see how we understand that. Same goes for the swapping network, right? When you look at China, there's huge condominiums. I spent a month in China, and you see apartment buildings for days. It's huge. And their charging doesn't exist the way it exists here. That's why swapping there is really something that is urban, that is local. You see it next to the apartment buildings. And we're catering that in a different way here in Europe, that we're trying to solve for highway travel, right? So long distance travels. So instead of a 20 minutes charge, you can go down, swap, go back on the highway, and continue your trip. That's how we're trying to change that around.
That's really interesting, and I'm curious to hear from the US perspective then. So what do you realize you need to do differently to serve the European market at General Motors?
Yeah, I think the first weeks, months probably, when I joined and started talking to the US colleagues, it was clear that there's a lot of education that needs to happen, right? Because the setup in general of how the market looks like in the US is very different from how CPOs operate, how many there are. I think the European market is very mature, but it's also very fragmented. There is not just one language that we all speak. There's different languages, there's different taxes, there's different ways how electricity sales are being treated. So I think just this education piece was really critical to make sure that we're not just being pushed a product and say, this is what we need to do. It was more of a learning effort on both sides, right? Understanding what, from a vehicle perspective, we will bring to the market, because that is really the legacy part, I would say, from our offering side. But then really looking at the specifics of the European market and making sure that what we do here really caters to the customer, but also to the market specifics, and finding the right partners. Because in North America, you basically partner with several CPOs, a handful, and you have a really good coverage. Now, also GM and also Ford have gone and now work with Tesla as well to make sure that there is even more coverage happening as well, which I think was very important to also address this in Europe and make sure that our colleagues understand there's already a vast variety of different CPOs in different countries, so that we can't just go out and build a couple bilateral connections with them to have this huge access to 500,000 chargers. So it was a lot about education, listening, learning, and that's what we really are, and really building out and rolling out our products as we go along.
I'm going to come back to the Tesla chargers in just a minute, but I still
sure
want to hear about Ford and how you have had to adapt, and what have you learned that you need to do differently in Europe as opposed to how things are done in the US.
Yeah, it's quite interesting to look at the differences of the both markets, North America and Europe. And the question is Europe one market? So we are serving 21 markets, and I recently talked to colleagues in Norway, and Norway, as we all know, is much ahead of all of us here with regard to e-mobility, though they are just used to drive pure electric, right? And when I talk to some colleagues more in the south of Europe, it's completely different. And this we, of course, take into account, but I just can add on what you have mentioned, because the market is so much more fragmented compared to the US market. We have much more regulation here in Europe compared to the US. The European market overall is ahead of the US market regarding market development and so on. Of course, to answer your questions regarding the differences in the customer behavior or customer demand, in the US, our most successful car is the F-150 Lightning, which is a really big pickup. Yeah,
Americans love
everyone,
big cars.
everyone loves it. Yeah, and it's this one. So we sold 1,000 F-150 pickups in Norway within 24 hours, and I would assume that this would be hard to do that in Germany. So the size of the cars is, of course, completely different, and really, it's about education. It's really also. So last week I was in the US for a trip to the charging colleagues there, and it's really for them, it's amazing to hear what is happening in Europe in the different countries. So really we try to take everything into account to really deliver the best experience for our customers here. Yeah.
So now I do want to go back to something that Julia mentioned. You all probably know that starting next year, the owners of electric vehicles made by GM and also by Ford will be able to charge their EVs at many of Tesla's charging stations across the US and Canada. This is kind of a big deal. Does this mean that other car makers will have no choice and will also have to follow? And I'm curious, like, what will be the impact of this, which is right now just in the US and Canada, what will be the impact here in Europe? So first of all, are we going to see more car makers joining this?
I can take that if it's okay for you, since Ford was the first company who was announcing the cooperation with Tesla. Let me say, after the announcement, I think I received 60 emails within 1 hour with many questions, and the people were asking me, okay, what are the colleagues of you doing there in the US? Yeah? Why are they collaborating with Tesla? First, let me say there's no impact on Europe. This is really a conscious decision the US guys have made a couple of months ago. And the good thing here in Europe, so Tesla, there's no way, has to equip their superchargers with CCS2, with our standard, which is regulated by the European Commission. But when you look at the fast charging, let's say, infrastructure, the quality, reliability, it's in the US, it's just not comparable with Europe. I mean, we had a very similar situation, I would say, 3 or 4 years ago. The reliability, the access, the availability was not that good in Europe. It has changed since the market evolved. The CPOs spent more money for maintenance and so on. And so why did we get the decision in the US for that? It's just about reliability with the supercharger network and with the cooperation between Ford and Tesla. Our customers will get access to more than 45,000 superchargers from now on, or from early next year on. And this is really the main reason to have a great customer experience for our customers there. So this is really focusing on the NACS standard. This is only focusing on the US, no impact for Europe on that. But of course, it really caused a lot of press and discussions around that.
Yeah, and was it a question of GM following suit as quickly as possible? And again, I'm going to ask the question, do you expect other car makers to do the same?
Yes, so obviously, maybe just to repeat, we don't see any impact on this decision for the European market. Luckily, we have a common standard across Europe that's really helping us with interoperability across different vehicle brands. And yes, we're really quick to adapt the decision that Ford made and really breaking down the barrier on that front. So that's, I think, a really good decision and a really good path forward for customers in North America to get access to a reliable charging network. I think we've seen many other OEMs following suit after this, and I will assume that more and more will do that, because by now NACS has become the de facto standard in North America and delivers reliability. Now, having said that, I'm also now curious how this is going to develop, because up until now it's been a closed ecosystem for Tesla. Now you're adding in other vehicle brands. So I think there's also going to be certain challenges that will come up with that. But now you have not just one company sitting at the table, now you have multiple, and obviously all of them want to have a reliable network great experience for the customer. So this is really something where I think that will drive more and more players to the table. And I think also what might be on the horizon is also thinking about how that is then being integrated into the experience, right? Because obviously we're now showing up at charging stations that belong to a very passionate company and a very driven company, but we would like our customers to stay in our vehicles, of course, and so the experience has to be the right experience and still has to be uniquely GM, uniquely Ford, uniquely other OEMs that are doing the same things in North America. So I think this is where it's going to be critical and really key to make sure that we can find a way to implement that into our charging solution for those customers and make it a unique experience for our customers. But again, having said that, I think this is also true in Europe, right? How do you work with all of these players and still deliver a unique experience on the digital side for customers, whether it's in the dash, on the app? I think there's lots of similarities, even though the players might be a little different.
I want to pick up now on something that Gert-Jan mentioned, how NIO is a pure EV brand and it's a rather new brand, so it's in a very different situation compared to the legacy brands or the more established brands. But we have to remember that this is sort of a moment of systemic change, right? Like this electric vehicle, can I call it a revolution? I keep wanting to say everything is a revolution, but it's true. I mean, we're seeing a huge shift in the mindset of people and in the openness and readiness and willingness and curiosity to really go green and turn to fully electric vehicles. The truth is that in this kind of atmosphere or spirit, consumers are actually more ready to abandon their long-standing loyalties. Like if everything is new and innovative, don't you think this actually ends up being an advantage for a brand like NIO?
Yep, absolutely. So we're now trying to get what we call the experience beyond refueling, right? Because when I look at people that have electric cars, great, there should be more electric cars, but what we want to do is kill the gas car, right? Once we do that, or how you do that, is asking yourself, what do people that have gas cars really don't get today? And charging remains one of those things, right? You have to plug in, you have to wait, you have to do all that, you have to get an RFID card. It's a big hassle. When you then look at what we're trying to achieve with a 5-minute battery swap, is really something that exceeds going to a fuel station. So instead of getting out of your car, putting in the gun, fueling it up, wasting €100, having to go inside, getting fuel on your shoes and all of that, you just stay in your car and you just do that swap. And that's an experience that people are really waiting for. And I drove from Rotterdam to here yesterday, and I did it in the same time as a gas car did, because I did 2 swaps instead of charging. And I'm not saying charging is bad. We need that ecosystem, and charging and swapping is what it will be. But for people that don't believe in just charging, just electric cars, this is really the step that they can make to really fall in love with it.
Julian, does that sound threatening? And also, Jörg, that this company would like to see internal combustion engines eliminated completely? How are you going to deal with this challenge in the coming years?
So for us in Europe, as we're coming back, we're also coming back only as an EV company. So there will be no ICE vehicles sold through GM or any of the brands in Europe. So this is really something that we want to include in the brand, right? This is going to be our brand new image that we want to create in Europe, and the brands that we have, lots of legacy, hundreds of years of really great knowledge and technological advantages that we have done, and we want to use all of that and our experience on the EV side and bring that to Europe. But our pickups and SUVs and trucks are still financing a lot of the great things that we do on the electric vehicle side. So we have a strong relationship and really a strong bond to that part of the business, and we have to be thankful for the money that they make on those great vehicles and have to be thankful to the customers that buy those vehicles to make sure that we can transition the company into the future and bring electric vehicles to the market that then are not just taken over from one region to the next, but might also be more adapted to specific markets like Europe, for example, as we look into the future. So yes, we want to transition into full electric vehicles. It certainly won't happen overnight, as we know. But we have to find that right transition point and phasing out of our very profitable ICE business into then the electric future and drive that revolution, as you called it.
Just to follow up quickly, but it is a huge risk, is it not? I mean, your company is not known as an EV expert. You're entering a very, very competitive market in European countries. Why did you decide to do this now?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we have a good track record for our products, especially in North America. I know we've not been visible too much here in Europe, but certainly have built a lot of good reputation among EV drivers in North America with the products that we rolled out there on the Chevrolet side, on the Cadillac side. So I think there is definitely lots of experience now that we can draw from the vehicle perspective and bringing that over to Europe. So the challenge certainly is to make this visible to customers. And we kind of have this dichotomy or this dynamic of different things happening. On the one hand side, the legacy automaker, GM, lots of tradition, long history. But then we also have this clean slate in Europe where we see a huge EV market, huge potential for us to come back. That is why we're coming back, second largest EV market in the world. And we want to take this advantage or take this opportunity and really build on just our EV experience. And right now, I think the brands that we have some images in people's minds that are maybe drawing back to the 50s, 60s, if I think about Cadillac specifically. But we want to take that and transform it into the future and establish Cadillac and our other brands as an EV brand in Europe and really make people think about Cadillac in a different way, in a premium electric vehicle brand way.
Super interesting stuff. I mean, it seems like there's still quite a road to go down to get there, and it's really courageous. I'd love to hear Ford's perspective on this. How threatened do you feel as a legacy brand and company when you're competing with the fresh and the new and the purely EV car makers? And how do you intend to rise to that challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, on the one hand, I'm a little bit jealous on Near and so on because Gerd can work on a white paper, right? So he does not have any kind of legacy things or structures and so on. But on the other hand, let me say, so Ford was founded more than 120 years ago, and it went through a couple of challenges and transformations in the last decades. And now we have completely decided to really follow the e-mobility path globally, right? And for Europe, we spent 2 billion euro for the Cologne Electrification Center. That's the plant where the new Ford Explorer will be built in the next years. And of course, it's challenging, to be very honest, to really transform it. But in the end, we have a great mindset in the company, and there I think the US mindset is helpful for that, to be more pragmatic, to really be faster maybe than others. And I think in the end, it's all about the people. We have the right people on board in Cologne, in all over Europe, but also in the US. We increased our software capabilities and further things around. And as I've mentioned before, so Ford, as of today, has a market share which is not that high. So for us, we see that really more as an opportunity than a risk to really now enter the e-mobility space here.
Just a quick reminder for everybody, you can already start sending in your questions or comments to our panelists. especially those of you who are following along on the live stream, do send us your questions or comments via the app, and we will make sure to leave enough time to get your questions to our panelists as well. So now I want to pick up on something else that one of you mentioned that's very special to Europe, and that is we love regulations. We love regulations in Europe, all kinds of European regulations, national regulations, cross-border regulations. So how is that very different from the situation that you have in the US, or also just for, again, a brand new brand and purely electric vehicle brand? How do you manage regulations, and is it a good thing? Do you feel that these regulations are actually pushing people to adopt EVs, or are they kind of annoying and getting in the way of the types of innovation that you think would be even better for boosting the market? So why don't we start again with Neo, the newcomer. Regulations, good or bad?
I would say net positive.
Net
right?
positive,
I mean,
okay. Okay.
There's a lot to debate about, but so when you look at the situation that NIO is in China and China in general, China's really progressive towards transitioning to new energy. And so whenever we want to put a swap station down, for example, or open up a NIO house, the regulators are very willing to that because they have brownouts, they have all these issues, and we actually help with that with the battery storage that we have. So they understand really what they want to do. I started 2 years ago as one of the first people joining NIO Power, so there was no understanding whatsoever of this regulation. And it's about hiring the right people that figure things out as they go. And obviously, we now have a great team of people that really understand the regulations. We have some great partners around that also help us with that. And of course, many regulations are outdated, but you have to deal with it. You can't just come in as a startup and just do whatever you want. You have to follow the rules and do them right. Because if you do them wrong, you're in an even worse place. And it's about building up step by step. So now we really understand how to put these things in the ground, how to get the right permits, how to get the right regulations. And I think what we're starting to see that the biggest bottlenecks are governments and permits and lack of digitalization there. And probably that will be taken over. I mean, as we want to accelerate the sustainable energy, as you want to accelerate to 2025, 2035, and really get more green energy and clean energy, it's about getting the right grid connections. It's having the right power. And that's not available today. So it's about making the governments understand how we do that, what we want, what we specifically need, and just open up the conversation. And if you have the right people that are capable of having that conversation, then things start flowing.
So if I understood you correctly, with governments and regulations, it's hard to do things with them, but it's impossible to do things without them. So.
And I've noticed every time you go into conversation with them, they're open and excited about what you're doing, right? So it's not that they wake up in the morning and say, hey, how do we hold electricity or new energy from coming up? No, they are genuinely interested, they genuinely want to understand, but they have their regulations to manage. And so mixing that makes it very complicated and time-consuming.
So we do, of course, have among our participants some representatives from municipalities and other government authorities, and also from grid operators and utilities. So I hope everybody's listening very carefully. Yeah, I'd love to get the take also from General Motors, and then the take from Ford.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think regulation is necessary to have a level playing field for everyone. It really helps to guide the way, to have some barriers on the outset. I think it also drives innovation in a way. If there's challenges, we're trying to overcome those by thinking about new ways to work around certain challenges. I think it really helps us in the way that we create new products along the guardrails that we have out there. And of course, we also have to be the ones speaking up and pointing out the things that might not be correct at the moment, but maybe then come up with new solutions in the future. So I think this is also the something on the task list of all of us, but certainly on the OEM side, to kind of say, hey, there is something that we want to improve and we want to work together. We don't just want to go in and go Wild West, stay in the US language, and just change things up. I think it's a collaborative effort from everyone involved, and there's lots of players, so we have to collaborate across the pond and really make sure that we're all on the same page. But to be honest, so for us, we're located in Zurich right now. This is our headquarters, and Switzerland is kind of a very federal state, as you may know, and there's lots of regulation even between different cantons. So that also teaches us on a very small scale how to overcome and how to collaborate with all of these different players. So hopefully we can take that spirit and expand it across Europe as we're scaling up.
Okay, so that means if you can do it in Switzerland, you can do it anywhere, right?
Sure, yeah. It's a good test ground.
Yeah, and Jörg, what about Ford's perspective on this?
Yeah, indeed, regulation is challenging us, but in the end, it will be good for the customer. I have to say that. So it's all about interoperability, right? So when you look at the differences between Europe and US, this is really a kind of USP in Europe. And I'm absolutely sure that a customer in Europe will be able to choose a car from one brand, a wall box from another brand, and then a kind of service from any kind of provider. And the whole system will work together because the hardware will be standardized and also the software. So what we can see now, of course, we all know the plugs, like Type 2, CCS2. This is done, but when I look into the software protocols, communication interfaces like ISO 15118, so this will be good. And in the end, so this, just let me say, this was one of the reasons why we moved away now from our own Ford branded or Ford sourced wallbox to a third-party approach, because we don't have a kind of USP for unidirectional wallbox. It's kind of commoditized, right? And this is because everything is standardized. Yeah? So in the end, of course, it's challenging us, but in the end, it's really good for the customer to have a standardized system and really an interoperable system between all the different pieces.
You just mentioned software, and that makes me think this is something else that traditionally car makers were not responsible for thinking about. All of these aspects of what an electric vehicle essentially requires nowadays. I mean, we can describe a modern EV as a computer on wheels in some ways. So how do you actually strike that balance between the OEMs having to deal with all of these components of electric mobility, software and other things, or then deciding, maybe we should outsource that to tech partners because our expertise in building cars and we'll leave the tech expertise to somebody else. How do you make those decisions? So maybe we can go in the other direction and we start with Ford.
That's a really good question regarding also what will we do internally and where will we partner with different parties. I'm honestly very impressed what Volkswagen is trying to do by CARIAD and all the own software development resources. We have a very, I think, well-performing and good software department in the US. In the end, I think it's all depending on competitiveness. Yeah? So when there is a service in the market which is really commoditized, I will name an example, then I don't think that it's worth to really spend money to that, to really compete with professional providers who are having a great service, and there is a competition where we would not be able to really to compete. But there are some critical items where we need really to go deep in, like the vehicle software and so on. So really would distinguish that between onboard things, offboard things, and in the end, we have to work closely together with many partners to create an overall good experience for the customer. But that's a good question, because we will not make and do and develop everything by our own.
Can you give us a quick example? So what would be something that you would say we would not do this ourselves, we would outsource? Like what? Yeah,
like what I've mentioned before, I would not develop a software for wall boxes. Yeah? This is really professional item by suppliers. Yeah? It's not about Ford to really bring a software for wall boxes. Yeah? Just to name one example.
And Julian, how does General Motors strike that balance? Like, what will be developed in-house, and what would you say is something that you would outsource to tech partners?
Obviously, the vehicle is at the core, and we want to make sure that what happens in the vehicle, the customer really associates with us, and we also want to have control over that and make sure that this is really the first invitation to customers into our brand, and hopefully for many years. So as we go further out in this concentric circle around the vehicle, obviously we look for partners, but especially in the situation that we're in today as GM Europe, where we're still building up the team and where we don't have a huge support base in-house, we're certainly working with partners and looking for partners to deliver on those solutions that are crucial for our customers. Wall boxes, charging solutions, and things like that. Certainly we want to brand these and want to be for the customer the single point of contact when it comes to that. But we recognize that we can't do everything ourselves because it's just impossible if you don't have a huge team. We do have, of course, global teams. We have development teams in North America. We have localized development teams that help us drive solutions in certain fields, software-defined vehicle, charging, and other digital solutions that we can tap into. But as we zoom out and as we look at the prioritization of the different markets, it becomes tough to get high to the list, to really bump that up. And so for us, the strategy then becomes finding the right partner that we can grow with and see what we can learn for ourselves and where it makes sense for us to actually bring something in-house. Or where we decide to really work with a partner long-term and make sure that we build a solid relationship, because this is what it's about, right? Building those relationships to deliver something for the customer that drives value for the customer.
And what's the perspective from Neo?
I think it's really funny hearing you two guys. Whatever you guys can do, we can't do. Yeah. It's the opposite world. Mm-hmm. So we're a digital-first company. We're very good at making the software. We're very good at making electric motors. We can go around the racetrack really fast with an electric car, but we can't build cars. That's why we had to get GAC on board to build our cars in China. All these mechanical things we're not really good at yet, and we're starting to in-house as we go along. But it's really interesting to hear how the old world is really good at doing mechanical stuff, hardware stuff, and we're getting good at the software, and we can match that up really perfectly. So maybe we should go for a drink after and see where we can integrate.
I mean,
that's what we like to hear at the Intercharge Network conference, because this is what it's all about. These new collaborations and partnerships, you'd be amazed what emerges out of a 2-day conference. Why don't we leave our discussion right where it is, because I have a feeling we have lots of questions from our audience. So again, the same routine as previously. If you're feeling brave and want to speak out, raise your hand. And I know we already have several questions that have been sent via the app. So I'm just scanning the room. We have somebody in the front. Why don't we begin in person? And then the next question we'll take from the app. This is a gentleman right in the center.
Hello there. My name is Karthik. I'm from Neo. Question for Ford and for GM, basically. How important do you think it is to differentiate yourself from the rest of the competition to win the race, right? Obviously, there's a big revolution happening. How important do you think it is to differentiate? And if so, how is Ford and GM differentiating yourselves from the rest of the competition? Thank you.
Yeah, I just can start if you like. It's not a new question, right? Yeah, how can we differentiate from others? Yeah, it's always a question. Yeah, for every competition. I think for the cars, it's about the design, about the feature set, and so on. But I think in the future, it's more than the car. Yeah, we are trying really to enable a kind of ecosystem for the customer. Yeah, and of course, yeah, therefore software is the most important is the most important part. Yeah, so from a Ford perspective, I'm very confident that we are able to really differentiate from the competition because, as I've mentioned before, we are now focusing on more, let's say, iconic cars. I've mentioned the Mustang, I've mentioned the Explorer, I've mentioned the F-150, more to come in the future. This is really bringing kind of adventurous spirit to a European market. And yeah, I do not have any other car brand in my mind who is really delivering that kind of experience. So I'm very confident that we have enough differentiation criteria for Europe. And as well, what I've mentioned regarding the ecosystem, it's not about doing everything by our own. In the end, it's really a broad discussion on the depth of value chain creation. But in the end, it needs to be a kind of consistent experience for the customer out of the vehicle, out of the services. So, yeah, would be my answer to your question.
Yeah, and just to add, I think certainly design is one aspect that our company has been driven by for decades, for hundreds of years, right? Creating beautiful cars that people feel at home in and feel safe in, that's certainly something. Safety is super critical for us, and we want to drive towards our future of zero emissions, zero crashes, and zero congestion. So I think creating solutions around that and digital experiences, again, the software piece that we certainly have to work hard on to really drive those solutions and deliver those solutions, that's definitely going to be a crucial point. And the digital experience is going to be something where we want to be standalone and set apart from the competition, but it's going to be a ways away to really make that happen. But it's a constant iteration, right? It's not just a monolith of delivery and then we're done. It's going to evolve over time.
Thank you very much. Let's take a question via the app. So how important for EV car manufacturers is it to build their own charging ecosystem or network? So who would like to tackle that one? Maybe Neo?
I can.
Well, I'm building my own network, so
okay, so never mind. Yes.
Well, so we're doing both charging and swapping currently is proprietary to Neo, so that's very important to us because it creates that extra value. You can get that experience beyond refueling that no one else can, so it makes us really stand out from the crowd. By the way, what we do is open, so our technology is open for others to adopt. So again, if we want to talk about partnerships, we can do that. But I think when it comes to charging, there's already a really, really good network out there. It's about creating that ecosystem, right? It's the software. It's about giving your users that app where they can very easily navigate from location A to location B, do long-distance trips over multiple chargers and swap stations, whatever you get. And I think that's really important. It's less the hardware, it's more the experience that you need to focus on. And that's what we're trying to do very well.
Yeah, just to add on that, it's not about having a, let's say, profitable business or, let's say, self-sustaining business. Our goal is to really have a self-sustaining business, but it's not about a revenue driver business, right? And it's really about the first step. So when we now look at the market, at the customers who are now deciding to buy an electric vehicle, it's really to support them in the transition from ICE to BEV. Yeah, this is valid for home charging, wall boxes, installation services, and so on, but also valid for public charging. The story might change when it comes to energy services and bidirectional charging. Therefore, we are currently assessing what is really the asset of the car manufacturer in the end, what kind of ecosystem would the customer need in the end to really save money or even to earn money. So in the end, it's important. Yeah, for the next couple of years, and we need to really establish a basis for that. But of course, we have to recognize this is really a competitive market out there. But don't forget, so one of the advantages of the legacy OEMs, let's say like that, we have a broad customer base, right? And the customer base we really would like to use to make them happy, to satisfy them with the right services. Also when it comes to plug and charge, great advantage, really a no-brainer from our infrastructure, vehicle and customer perspective. And I think we are in a kind of front runner position for that, to really implement plug and charge into the future ecosystems.
Did you want to add something?
Just adding to this briefly, obviously in North America, given our market share there, we're investing a lot in infrastructure, building out charging networks for our customers. Also the joint venture that we recently announced, certainly a big step ahead. In Europe, as was pointed out, right, it's already a lot going on, and we don't feel the need today to add to the charging landscape, because there's already 500,000 plus publicly available chargers out there. However, as we are in the position of building our brand, there could be opportunities for us to really think about the experience and think about sort of destination charging basically for our customers, to make sure that they have a great experience when they go on vacation, they go to a hotel, they go to a restaurant, and things like that. So I think this is kind of where our mind is at today in the situation that we're in, as we're building the brand, as we're building the reputation, to kind of build these, as you pointed it out as well, right? Build these experiences around charging, not just adding numbers. I think it's really now about experience and to build the relationship with the customer.
Any question from our audience? Yeah, we have a young lady right over here, and then we'll take one from the app again and see how much time is left over.
Time is running.
Hello, Julia Sandén, business owner from Volvo Cars. Thank you very much for the interesting discussion. And yes, coming back to what you said regarding interoperability and now Tesla opening up, which I think is something that we all are welcoming, and that we, as many other European OEMs, are of course also joining. With the heavy investments that we see on the US market and the lower regulations, as you mentioned, for interoperability, how do you think this is going to develop in the future? Since, I mean, I think we all agree that this interoperability, making it easy for the customer to access all the networks, is crucial for a successful EV transition.
Who would like to tackle that one?
I can start on that. So I think interoperability is, of course, also important for the US market. Don't get me wrong. It's just driven by the regulation of the European Union that we will get that earlier in the European Union. And when I look at the US market, I think we will see a very similar landscape, but just a little bit later than in the European Union. I don't know if you'd like to add something.
It's going to be a transition, right? And I think also coming back to what I mentioned before, I think we now have to see what this ecosystem is going to look like as we add in different OEMs and different vehicles from other OEMs into that landscape. Of course, we want our customers to go north to south, east to west, and find chargers that they can use and not be stuck somewhere. So I think we've solved, I would say, from a battery perspective, the range anxiety. Now we kind of have to think about that charging anxiety topic and make sure that they find chargers that work, that they can pay at, and they can keep them on the road as far as they want to go.
Thank you very much. Let's maybe check about a question via the app. Next, we have one. Are you expecting limitations with the adoption of NAC's connectors in NA when it comes to, for example, charging at high voltage infrastructure or bi-directionality?
Again, I think it's now this interesting transition phase of adding in other vehicle OEMs and looking at the system that exists, the supercharger network, more holistically. What is the demand from the other vehicle OEMs, and how can that be implemented? Of course, it's not just going to work by pushing. I think it has to be collaborative, and I think that what we've seen so far is a really good collaboration in the outset of the partnership with Tesla in North America. So we believe that there is going to be a lot of collaboration between the teams to really make sure that there is going to be new features and also availability of 800-volt charging architecture support in the network as it ramps up and as we add more and more vehicles. So limitations initially, yes. But over time, I think we will overcome those, and there will be a development of the network in a positive direction for all customers and all players.
Yeah.
I think we have time maybe for one more question, if somebody in the audience wants to speak up. Yep, this young lady right over here.
Thank you. My name is Angelica from Blog Surfing. I would like to know a bit more about the experience of your customers charging at Tesla superchargers. So how does it work?
So just I can take that for the US, because for the US it really will work based on our Ford Pass app. So the customer can just approach the supercharger and will take our Ford Pass. Ford Pass is our core vehicle app, combined the vehicle features with the charging features. And yeah, it's just the same experience with any other app. So it's really possible to have the authentication and the payment via the Ford Pass app. So it shouldn't be a difference to what you know from here. Currently in Europe, the experience is differently for non-Tesla drivers, because therefore you really need the Tesla app. So it's not possible for the time being to use a Ford app or a GM app or whatever to use superchargers.
It looks like we're really out of time, but I know that there's so many more questions that people have sent in that we didn't get a chance to answer. But gentlemen, I can presume you're more than happy to chat with anybody who approaches you, either later today or tomorrow if you're around. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for these fantastic questions, first of all. For the questions, you can clap for yourselves. That's what I want you to do. And also to our panelists for your insights and for listening to each other and to our audience. And I know there's going to be some fantastic collaborations and partnerships that are going to emerge by the end of this conference. So once again, Jörg, Julian, and Gert-Jan, many thanks indeed to the three of you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.